Hello, everyone. My name is John Lee. I am a local realtor here in the greater Philadelphia area. I'm here with Monica Auyeung, and she is a good friend of mine. We train together in jiu-jitsu, and she also is a personal trainer. So, Monica, we're going to ask some, or I'm going to ask some questions. The first thing that I always ask everyone is tell me about yourself and what you do.
So I am a personal trainer. I tried to switch over my title of myself as entrepreneur, but sometimes I feel like that has a bad connotation to it. Because outside of personal training, I do have other things that I would like to be able to develop. Like I want to be able to have a gym that I can rent space to other personal trainers. So that is another business in itself. And then also I want to open up a kombucha bar. So like those things are in the future, but I think just thinking about those things, I want to call myself an entrepreneur, but not quite yet. Um, I can talk a little bit about my background. I have my bachelor's in biochemistry and environmental science and my master's in education. I was a chemistry teacher for a while in LA, but then I decided that teaching just wasn't a fit for me at that time. And so I took a little bit of time off to go travel. I traveled for about 4 months before I came back. And at that time, I was pretty interested in just working out and fitness for myself. But I saw that my friends, I was doing CrossFit classes. So with my friends who owned the gym, I asked them if I could get involved. And I started interning with them and then teaching classes. And from there, I transitioned into personal training. And that's where I am now.
So how did let's kind of elaborate on that. So how did education kind of translate into teaching others in fitness and exercise?
It actually helped a lot because I do seek perfection or close to perfection as a teacher. You always just want your students to learn, and it's always exciting to be able to see something click. So, when it comes to fitness and movement, when someone sees that, oh, okay, it shouldn't feel this way, or my knee shouldn't hurt in a squat, being able to make those connections for them is actually really rewarding for me. And then also being able to help. Now I've changed my motto to helping you age well, because I think a lot of people, yeah, they might lift a lot or they might lift heavy or whatever that is, but the end goal ultimately is to be able to age well, to be able to, when you're older, still walk upstairs and not require assistance. And so I being able to help people do that is very rewarding for me, because I a little bit of going back into college, I thought I was going to go pre-med because I did want to go into something that helped people. And ultimately I didn't, but I think that my career choice now still allows for that.
Yeah, you know what? Like I always see your spirit in that because even like when we train jujitsu together, like you're teaching the women's class, like you have experience as a teacher, you're obviously being a trainer. It requires a certain level of how do I say it? Heart, right? Like a
Yeah.
heart. Yeah, so it's definitely encouraging to hear you mention that and just also your history. Now going to that, tell me how you grew up from your childhood to now. Like what is your story? I always ask everyone that, like, how did you become who you are now today?
Growing up, I'm the middle child of three. My I have an older brother and I have a younger brother. My younger brother, actually, he has I never really know what to call it. It's a mental handicap where even though he's 29 now, but he has I would say the mental capability of a 3 or 4 year old, where he's not able to speak and he's still in diapers and he is able to walk. And I think from what I know, he understands schedules. Like he knows that at a certain time it's lunchtime, so he'll just walk into the cafeteria and he'll sit at his seat. So things like that. And I became pretty much one of his primary caretakers because my mom was working a lot. So my parents are divorced. My mom worked a lot, and my older brother and I took care of our younger brother. But I'd say because of fitting the female standards, I took on more of that motherly role. So I'd say that that had developed my nature as wanting to be a teacher, wanting to be a caretaker. And yeah, so that played a lot into my background. And then also growing up in a Chinese household where there was a lot of expectations for excelling, for doing well so that you could take care of yourself financially, and then always making sure that you were getting the good grades so that you could get a good job so that no one has to worry about you. And then in a way it's like proving that you can do well as a minority.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that that played a lot into it. Also being sheltered, create, I guess, gave me more of that traveling spirit because right outside of high school, I went to Connecticut for college. Then I went to Massachusetts for my master's, and then moved out to LA right after. And I lived out there for about 7 years. And in that time, I've traveled a lot. I've traveled to six of the seven continents. And I mean, I love being able to do that. And it's always interesting to be able to bring those stories back to my family because my grandma's always like, yeah, you're crazy. I would never do that. Because I feel like there's a sense of security in staying put. But that, I mean, I think it's kind of the opposite for me where I felt like a big fish in a small pond and I wanted to be able to explore.
Yeah, I remember when you said you were from California, and I was like, "Why the hell are you back?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what brings you over here? I mean, obviously, you have work here. You have
Uh-huh.
so many things going on. So, what brings you back over here?
Um, so I grew up around here, around Northeast Philly, and then when I left, I really had no end goal. I moved out to LA because a friend was like, "Hey, let's go out there. We're in our 20s. Why not?" And so we went out there to teach, and then I really had no plans of when or if I was going to move back to Philly. I kind of always had it in my mind that I was going to just because I do still have that familial connection. And I was like, if I do have kids, I would want them to be closer to my family. So that was always a thought, but I just didn't know if it was going to eventually happen just because it's not on my radar right now. Um, During COVID was where I didn't get to see my family as much. I probably would come back 2 or 3 times a year for either a big celebration like either Chinese New Year or my grandpa's birthday or one of those things. Um, but then COVID, I didn't see them for I think a year and a half. I didn't get to come
Mhm.
back here.
Right.
And I was starting to realize that it did matter that I was physically close to my family. And then my grandpa was getting close to his end that I was just like, I need to come back. I want to be closer to my family. So I moved back right around January of 2021, and then my grandpa passed in February. So I feel very lucky that I got to be able to be with him when he passed.
Mm, that's touching. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, to the next segment, with your athletic training, I know that you have a lot of history of being an athlete. I know you mentioned to me that you were in rugby, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So like what other things have I not yet heard from you?
It's funny because it shocks people when I tell them that I wasn't athletic growing up.
What?
Sports is not something that
Okay.
my family cared about. It was always academics.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I started in marching band. Well, in general, in like orchestra,
What
concert band,
the
marching band. So I was, yeah, it's funny because of that big transition. I think the friends that I'm still connected to from high school, it shocks them that I'm so physically inclined now
Yeah.
because I was so musically inclined before.
Yeah.
My aunt had a flute from her high school days, so I picked it up. I
Yeah.
just got really into that. And from there, I thought that because I wanted to still combine that like pre-med idea, coming from high school, I was like, okay, I want to be a music therapist.
Yeah.
Um, but then I went to a school that didn't have a big music program. I went there because of scholarships. I went there for finances, and then I wanted to do something. I just didn't know what. And it was actually a combination of, because my brother played football and I still had that competitive spirit and I didn't play football, I still wanted to play something that was similar just to kind of prove myself. But also it's funny, there's an episode of Friends where Ross is playing rugby, and I always thought it was just such an obscure sport that I was like, sure, I'll try it. Prior to rugby, I played a year or two of tennis in high school, just because I didn't have to try out for it.
Yeah.
And no other sports. I wasn't good at any of the other sports. So at that I started tennis, then also was not good enough to play tennis in college. Then I started playing rugby, which was such a random sport that I was like, I don't know if I like it, but I felt bad for not going to the practices because my biology TA was one of the captains of the team, and she
Oh
would be like, "Hey, are
gosh.
you coming to practice?"
Yeah, that's a lot of
And
accountability.
and
Yeah.
so I felt bad. So I just kept going, but then eventually did fall in love with it. I fell in love with all the people that were there because they were such a random group of people.
Right.
Um, yeah, I would say that rugby kind of attracts misfits, and from there, yeah, I played rugby through college, and then I didn't think I was gonna play when I moved out to LA, but I didn't know what else to do. I started running. I was prepping for the LA Marathon because I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. But then I was kind of bored of running by myself all the time, so I wanted to see what else was out there. So then at that time, Pasadena, which was pretty close to where I was living, they were just starting their women's team, and it was like perfect timing. So then I joined, and I was one of the people who was most knowledgeable about the game. So then I kind of helped to grow the team. And then from there, I got burnt out by a little bit of the team drama and playing the team sport of where I wanted to be competitive. Some people were just there as a hobby. And so I was a little frustrated about that. And at the same time, my friend, she was doing jujitsu, and I went to go watch her compete. And from there, I was just like, that looks like a fun sport. Let me try it. And it kind of coincided with another friend who had just started, and I was living closer to him. And he was like, hey, come try it at my academy. I went to try it, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. And now you're teaching the women's class.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
I
Yeah.
know.
So for our listeners, how did we meet?
We met on the Mets. I don't remember the first class I met you in. Um, but
You
yeah,
you want my story of that?
I wish I had
You want
another
my story?
story. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
The
sorry, I
first
don't
time,
remember our first meeting.
no, the first time it was on the mats, and I was
Yeah.
like, God, this girl is so strong. Like, I was like, dude, it was so. But the thing is, you weren't just strong, you were so technical. And I had a friend of mine. I don't know if you remember who he was. He was a visitor. His name is Albert.
Uh-huh. I
He
don't
came in
remember.
during, yeah, you probably don't remember, but like I think you were a blue belt at the time.
Uh-huh.
And he came in and he's also a blue belt, and he was like, "Yo, who's that girl? That girl just destroyed me." And I was like, "Yeah, that's Monica." And I was like, "God, like I was so shocked by your level of talent at just such an early level. And I thought you've been like just naturally athletically gifted,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't know like you went from marching band to now like a pretty competitive jujitsu athlete. So yeah, I mean it's kind of going that topic as well. Like what do you got going on in jujitsu now?
Jujitsu now. So I was thinking about doing Tap Cancer Out, which is the next tournament that's
Right.
local. Um, but I am actually going to skip it this year because I want to just go and support whoever is competing. I do still, even though jujitsu is a fairly individual competitive sport, it's great to still have a team, and that's what I miss about my academy from LA, because it was whenever there was a group competing, because there are so many competitions out there, that it was easy for people who weren't competing to go and support you. And that's what I've been missing from moving back here is, yes, there might be some people from your academy that compete, but you don't have that many people around you that are cheering you on.
Hmm.
And so I want to be able to do that at Tap Cancer Out, because I think there are going to be a few people from United who are competing, and I just want to be able to be there without feeling a pressure of, oh, am I on next? Am I on next? So that I'm skipping, and then I'm just also enjoying just training and not feeling a pressure to be like, I need to practice this thing. I just want to pick up whatever I can right now and learn anything that I haven't, and then just get better at the things that I know that I'm not that great at. And next year we'll see what competitions show up. I would like to still compete at the IBJJF level, because there aren't that many competitions around here. But also I've been having this back and forth with how much do I want to travel to compete, because that also puts a toll on your wallet as well.
Yeah, it does. And just for our listeners, IBJJF, that is just like the standard of competition. And that's like that's like what everyone aspires to do and compete in. So just for our listeners. Now, kind of pivoting here, going back into your experience as a trainer and also even as an entrepreneur, who has been your mentor in the field?
Who's been my mentor as a trainer? I've had a couple. My friends who own the CrossFit gym, they were trainers at a global gym, similar to LA Fitness, where they had been there for years, and they were like master trainers. And then when CrossFit kind of became popular was where they decided to open up their own CrossFit gym. But in learning how to coach CrossFit, I learned also a lot about just how to interact with people in general, and also about good body movement. I think a lot of the bad reputation that CrossFit gets is that it injures people. And I think my response to that is always, it's not CrossFit that injures people, it's bad trainers that injure people. Because if they don't know what they're looking for, you get a 2-day course that teaches you that allows you to coach it, and a 2-day course is not enough. It doesn't get you to become an expert in it.
Mhm.
And so I think that some people, they know how to, they might also not know how to teach a movement, but they are supposed to know how to teach a movement, but then they don't know necessarily how to watch for proper movement. And with my friends, they were able to put me through an internship that was like, okay, so what did you see wrong here? And it was constant questions of that actually made me have to think, okay, what do I see wrong? And then also, how do I correct for that? And then how do I make sure that they are correctly moving like this when I'm not looking? So how to be able to train that as well. And so it was a lot of that I am very grateful to have had them help me develop myself as a personal trainer. And then from there, working at different I worked at another gym after that, and being able to watch other trainers train, I know what I like to do, and then also I like being able to pick up other things, other cues that they might have. Because what I say might not necessarily hit home for someone. But if I see that someone else says it a different way and it gets the same result, then that might be something that I can put into my tool belt.
Right.
So yeah, I would say I had two mentors when I first started personal training. And then since then, everyone that I've worked with in that same realm has been somewhat of a mentor to me as well.
Mhm. So let me ask you a funny question. Okay. we go to LA Fitness together, right?
Uh-huh.
And we see 10 dudes just lifting weights, right?
Uh-huh.
Out of those 10 people, how many of them are incorrectly lifting?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. It depends on the movement sometimes. But I'll say like four. Let's say four.
Okay. And two of them are really obvious. Like two of them, they're probably doing curls like this, like
Yeah, yeah,
they're swinging
yeah.
around, they're skiing, right?
Yeah,
And the
right.
other two are probably like more subtle, right? Like things that
Uh-huh.
you might notice, like, wow, like that's incorrect.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like what kind of movements do you see that are typically incorrectly done, but by appearance to common folk might look correct, but it's actually wrong?
The deadlift.
Okay, that was quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think in training people too, the deadlift is the one that's most commonly misconceived because I'll start to teach the deadlift and they're like, yeah, my back usually hurts. And I'm just like, no, your back should not hurt. And so it's like there have been high school athletes that I've trained before and let's say they come from football where you are supposed to lift,
Yes.
but the coaches might not necessarily teach you how to lift and they'll just show you. And from there, you're just doing what you see. And so they'll just be like, yeah, usually my back hurts after this movement. And I'm just like, no, then you're doing it incorrectly. You should not be using your back. You should be using your legs, your glutes, and your hamstrings.
Right.
And so that's why I feel like that's a quick response because in my experience, the most number of people have misconceived that movement and they avoid it usually because they're like, well, I'm going to do other things that I can develop my posterior chain with other than the deadlift, which is a great movement. And it's powerful once you know how to do it properly.
Right. Yeah, so going with the deadlift, or even any lift for that matter, should you or suggest for one person to or any person to lift a weight that allows them to maximize perfect form without like overly doing it? Like what's your strategy on that?
There is a fine line. I do like to start most people on lightweight,
Right.
just to make sure that they do it properly.
Mhm.
But sometimes when it's too light, they might not get the feedback. So putting on a little bit extra to still give them that challenge, sometimes it corrects for itself. But a lot of times, even with lightweight, if I'm like, okay, make sure that this part is activated and you're squeezing this, and they'll be able to feel that even without weight at all. Like
Mhm.
I have my certification in Olympic weightlifting, and whenever I teach people Olympic weightlifting to start, I'll teach them on PVCs, which weigh like 8 ounces. And after 2 hours of lifting with a PVC in holding positions, I've had a lot of people tell me like I'm super sore the next day. And so a lot of times you don't need that weight. So I guess like that is a very long answer to say that it depends on the movement sometimes,
Right.
but like um sometimes the weight does give feedback that I might not necessarily be able to get them to understand until there's the weight on there. But a lot of times I will start with lighter weight, make sure your form looks good, and then tell you, even if I am putting on heavier weight, your technique does not change. You just might have to brace a little bit more.
Hmm. Hmm. So I love this. This is so much valuable information. So kind of leading into this path here, what are like some suggestions, right, that you have for people who are currently getting back into weight training or just starting out?
People who are just getting back into weight training is to either try a personal training session with a certified personal trainer, with someone who has experience and good feedback. I'm not trying to hype myself, but a lot of times people just need to learn a little bit of form,
Right,
and starting there, or also just being consistent with it, and not necessarily wanting to throw up the heavy weights immediately, checking your ego at the door.
right.
Because I think a lot of people that might have been athletic in the past and they've taken a break, and then when they come up to me, they're like, oh, I used to be able to lift this, or I used to be able to do this, and they kind of get disappointed in themselves sometimes when they aren't able to get back to that immediately. And I'm like, that was 4 or 5 years ago. Whatever amount of time has passed, you're a different person now. And so it's like, it's not impossible that you'll get there again, but you just have to give it time, because it didn't happen overnight that you lost all this strength. So it's not going to happen overnight that you're going to gain it all back. So
Right.
I think a lot of times it is just recognizing that, yeah, you know that you are capable of it, but letting yourself have that grace period to get back to it.
No, this is so helpful because even like for me, I'm getting weight training from a friend of mine and I'm learning how to clean.
Mm.
And like for the longest time when I was cleaning, I would just snatch the bar and just go like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Instead, like you have to legitimately put your elbows underneath
Uh-huh. Yes.
and clean that
Uh-huh.
way. And literally the same way you're explaining with the PVC, like I'm taking 5 pound with like 5 pound
Uh-huh.
dumbbells.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm looking in the mirror and I'm doing it literally in steps because I'm just
Uh-huh.
like making
Uh-huh.
sure that the form is good. And like a lot of that is just putting my personal pride to the side. And
Uh-huh.
like I really want to go on that bar and just start
Yeah,
like
yeah,
lifting
yeah,
like
yeah,
like in the movies, you know how they like
yeah.
lift so
Right. Yeah, I get that. And that's one of my challenges as a female trainer working with men, is that they they want to be able to lift the heavy weights, and I have to be like, chill out. So I think that also is that it's definitely putting the pride aside.
Okay, this is awesome. So we're gonna keep going down this lane because I think this is so informative. So what's the biggest difference that you've seen in the past as opposed to now with weight training? So like, what are some new theories? What are some new, like just beliefs, things that you've learned that have changed?
Let's see. Beliefs that I have
Or
noticed.
even myths. It can even be myths, like people think that you have to lift like this, but in reality you lift like
Uh,
that, or anything along those lines.
well, one of the biggest myths that I feel like I definitely still see is that you are not supposed to squat below parallel. I think that that's definitely one of the biggest things where
So out of those 10 people, 4 of those people do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or if they do squat below parallel, they're going completely ass to grass um where they're just also losing the curve of their S spine. I don't know how much that would make sense to viewers, but we naturally have a slight curve in our back, and some people, because they do have the mobility to squat, they'll let that curve drop and it'll dip, and so then there's no stability there. So there's sometimes people don't squat below parallel, where they don't let their hips go past their knees because they're like, it's going to be bad for my knees. And then some people who do squat, they're like, no, you're supposed to squat low past your knees. They'll go too low.
Right.
So I feel like it's the myth definitely is in not squatting below your knees. The incorrection sometimes, or the overcorrection, is squatting too low. That's one myth that I can definitely think of. Um, I'm just thinking, what other things have developed in the time that I've been training people. I don't think there is anything that really comes to mind right now. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything right now.
Yeah, I do find that especially on the squat racks, a lot of people they do tend to go a lot lower than I'm
Mhm.
like, damn, that guy's going real low.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like I don't even know. I know it's not a good thing to go too low. So like what are the reasons of why it's bad to go too low?
Um, can I step out to show you
Yeah,
physically?
sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So I'm not wearing shoes, but I don't think that matters. Okay. So naturally, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, let me get rid of this lighting. Okay. Is that okay? Let's see if that's better. Okay. So naturally, if you're looking at this curve in my back, we have this natural S curve in our back when we're standing.
Right.
Oh, we don't naturally tuck our hips under to stand because it's just not how our spine works. Because
Right.
if you look at just an X-ray of someone's spine, it curves. There's a
Curves.
slight curve at the top, and then there's a slight curve at the bottom. So in maintaining that curve, that's where your strength is when you're squatting. Sorry, I'm just going to move it down. So while you're squatting, you squat hips back and you want to keep this curve with your core brace. And then if you go too low and your hips dip, there's no strength here. So here you're stacking your entire body on your back. And that's why some people's back hurt. Does that make sense? I don't know if you can see it. So there's this, which is a quote unquote Asian squat, but then this is where you have your strength. You are using your legs, you're using your butt to support this position. Do you see that difference? I don't know if you see it.
Well, there's like kind of like an arching in your back when you're in a proper squat, as opposed to like the weight is literally like bending you forward instead of you being kind of
Yeah, and some people they like to bounce out of the squat, and so they will go to their end range. They'll go all the way to the bottom, and then they'll come all the way back. And yes, there is a clearance where you can bounce, but you should still stay strong in your movements. You don't want to bounce out of your tendons or your ligaments. You want to still be strong and use the stretchiness of your muscles to be able to bounce out of.
Yeah, this is awesome. Okay. Well, we'll kind of wrap it up here. But I'll just ask you like two more questions. One is, what is your business looking for to make your job easier? I think the easiest thing for a lot of people is saying, "Hey, I need more, I need more clients," right? But if you can fill a specific role, make a purchase, an acquisition, what is one thing you personally would need help with?
Right now it's I'd say my time, because I have a lot of things that I want to do. I'm also struggling with being able to give up some things, like let's say training, because I used to train jujitsu 5 to 6 times a week, but lately it's been more on the 3, if I'm lucky, a week. And it is being able to think, okay, this is ultimately a hobby that I need to be okay with not doing as often, because I do need to focus more on business. So I'd say time, and or an assistant, an assistant to just do the things that I know I need to just sit in front of a computer and do.
Right.
And so right now that's kind of where I am. Or an investor, I guess. Now that I think of it. Because I do want to be able to have a larger space that I can fit for renting out to personal trainers. The space that I have currently, it's good for me and one other person. So me and someone that I'm training, maybe two sometimes. But the model of it, because it's in an office building, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with renting it out to other trainers to come in while I'm not there. So I want to be able to have that space, but I also don't want to have any business partners or investors that I feel like I'm working for anyone. Because then that just negates anything of being a
Business
business owner
owner.
myself.
Exactly.
Um,
Okay.
so I'd say that if I were to summarize the 3 things that would make my life easier right now, is either time, and assistant, or I guess
Something
someone
like
to
a
invest,
private
but
investor.
like not want to have anything to do with me. So a sugar daddy.
Or a private investor, someone
Yeah, yeah,
willing
yeah.
to give you money, but not they don't want anything to do with what you're doing. They just want to, maybe a specific return or something on it, on their
Mhm.
investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And lastly, where can our listeners find you?
Let's see, where can they find me? They can find me at United. No, I'm kidding. If they ever want to train. My Instagram is imonstoppable. It's I_MON_stoppable. I feel like Facebook isn't very popular anymore, but I'm under Mon Auyeung. And then I think those are the only 2 social media platforms that I'm pretty up to date with. I don't do other ones right now.
Okay. Well, Monica, thank you so much. I will make sure that I put all your information in the description below, and love to, hang out with you again and train again as soon as possible.
Yes.
And thanks.
Thank you, John.
All right. I'll talk to you.
Okay, see
All
ya.
right. Bye.